afternoon. Welcome to our Let's Talk Parkinson's online panel discussion, Men Who Care, Emerging Conversations with Male Care Partners. Today's program is brought to you by Parkinson's Community Los Angeles. We are so fortunate to have with us 4 incredible male care partners that will be sharing their stories and some tips. I'm Angela F., and I'm honored to serve on the PCLA board. For those who don't know us, we are a nonprofit that supports families living with Parkinson's through free education programs like this one, online and in-person support groups, social events, and so much more. If you appreciate our work, please consider making a donation at PCLA.org. Your donation is 100% tax deductible, so thank you in advance. We rely on your generosity to help us continue this incredibly important work. Our moderator today is Tom Knechtel. He is an artist living in Los Angeles, and his work is represented by Marc Selwyn Fine Arts and is included in the collections of many museums, including the Museum of Modern Art, the Los Angeles County Museum of Art, the Museum of Contemporary Art, and the Hammer Museum, amongst others. Tom's partner of 20 years was Rabbi Robert Baruch. Bob had a long and illustrious career, including serving as a rabbi in Rio and at the Wilshire Boulevard Temple. He taught Jewish studies at the Milken School and appeared as himself in The Birdcage. He was diagnosed with Parkinson's in 2008, and he was part of the PD support group that Nessa and Mike Weinstein led and took an active role in learning about how to live with his condition. In November of 2017, Bob contracted sepsis and was hospitalized for 2 months. During that time, his PD moved forward rapidly. Tom brought Bob home on December 26th and cared for him at home until May 2018, when he died. Our panelists today begin with Dennis Brager. He has been married for almost 37 years to artist Marcia Brager. 10 years into their marriage, Marcia went to the doctor with what they thought was a carpal tunnel syndrome and came home with a diagnosis of, yes, Parkinson's. The rest, as they say, is history. Jim Cussman worked for ABC Television Network for 48 and a half years and retired in February 2024. His wife, Susan, was originally diagnosed with an essential tremor in 2013 and underwent a very successful DBS, deep brain stimulation, procedure in 2014. The essential tremor was the precursor to a Parkinson's diagnosis in 2015. And after retiring, Jim became Susan's full-time caregiver. Susan passed on August 17th, 2023. To this day, Jim is grateful for the help and love of the virtual support group and Judy Yaris, and continued support at every opportunity. He truly believes the sum of knowledge about Parkinson's in this group is far greater than any one neurologist has at his or her disposal. Stephen Rubin is a retired lawyer whose career spans Justice Department attorney, law professor, partner and department head at a national law firm, and law practice for many years in his own firm. He married his late wife, Barbara, while a law student and she a graduate student at Columbia. They were married for 52 years.
Thank you all for coming, and thank you, Dennis, Jim, and Stephen, for agreeing to share your stories with us. I thought what I would do would be to start with asking each of you to talk about how you adapted to the changes that are involved in caretaking for one's partner. And Dennis, why don't we start with you, since your situation is an ongoing one?
Sure. And thank you, Tom and PCLA, Judy, and Angela for inviting me to speak today. So, Tom, as you said, it's an ongoing story, being a caregiver, and it started 26 years ago when Marcia was diagnosed. And for the first 10 years, it was a cakewalk. She took a couple of pills, and our biggest issue was which of our friends should we tell that she had Parkinson's, because if we didn't tell them, they weren't going to know. The next 10 years started to become more challenging. And in 2012, Marcia had DBS surgery. And like Steve's wife, the surgery was quite successful. To this day, Marcia doesn't have any noticeable tremors. She's got plenty of other symptoms, but the tremors have been quelled even now. Let's see, this is 13 years later and still working, which at the time nobody was quite sure as to how long the treatment would continue to be successful. But so far, fingers crossed, that part is working. But what started to happen in 2013, 2014, somewhere around then, Marcia's freezing episodes got worse. I remember one time we were walking across the street and she froze right in the middle of the street. Couldn't get her out. I literally picked her up around the waist and walked to the curb with her. That's how bad it was at points. And over the last 5 years, things continue to, is disimprove a word? I hate saying going downhill, but so I'll try to invent the word here, disimprove.
I like disimprove.
And in terms of walking, she has a great deal of difficulty, getting across a room even at this point, starting to see some cognitive issues. But nevertheless, we have continued to try and keep our lives as, I'll call it normal, as possible. We've been traveling internationally, despite the challenges. In the last 5 years, we've been to Africa, Australia, Peru, Thailand, Vietnam, Singapore, Cancun, Mexico City, Costa Rica. So we've kept busy. I will say, though, we just got back from Greece and Amsterdam, and I think it's going to be our last international trip. It's getting just too difficult with the lack of infrastructure, and just 10-hour plane rides are just too difficult at this point.
Dennis, can you talk a little bit about those difficulties in terms of how they affect you?
Well, I don't spend a lot of time thinking about how they affect me. I tend not to be a very introspective person, but obviously
Part of the reason that we're having this panel.
Yes, I know. Look, they affect me because they affect what I can do, every day. I mean, even though we have help around the house, I'm still here, all the time. I don't tend to, go out with friends as much as I, did before. And so it's definitely impactful on my life. It's easy to get frustrated. You get frustrated at the disease, but you have to be careful that you're not taking it out on your partner. Because you're like, well, why can't you walk across the room? What do you mean you've got to go to the bathroom? We just sat down in the restaurant for dinner. So it's challenging, and I just try and keep remembering you know, who my wife is and why I married her. And I try and remain hopeful, optimistic, and upbeat, because it's just way too easy to go down the woe is me rabbit hole.
Yes.
And I don't think that's helpful to either person in the relationship. You know, I keep up with my exercise. I try and do stuff, everything from, you know, I'm taking courses through Wilshire Lifelong Learning Institute. You know, you join for $50 a year and you can take, you know, all these different courses, you know, some of them quite frivolous, like the one on, I took a class on Woody Allen and his clips. So
it's important to keep one's sense of humor while one is going through this.
yes, yes, indeed.
Stephen, why don't we move to you? I want to mention that Stephen's wife, Barbara, I believe, was a founding member of PCLA. Is that correct, Stephen?
We were asked to give biographies for the program, and I tend to go on, which I will try to avoid here. So I kept my bio short, and I didn't say much about Barbara, and this is an opportunity to do so. It's very clear that we have in common that we were caregivers not to any person or not to just any family member, but to our spouses, and that, or significant others wherever we were in the spectrum. But the emotion that goes into that, the dependency as men that we had on our spouses, I think is unlike any other relationship, and made the caregiving, and I'm sure the caregiving we've each experienced is quite different, but made the caregiving in general as intense as it could ever possibly be. In my case, Barbara stayed home with the boys. I have, as a result of that, two incredibly accomplished, successful executives in technology companies. She was the homemaker. She took care of everything, and I was the breadwinner. And more than that, she let me flounce around in law school teaching, and I was a judge at one point. She indulged me. And we had I guess, I don't know how you define a successful marriage, but to me, I couldn't ask for anything else. And when Parkinson struck, it was by stealth in early 2000 with a tremor that was misdiagnosed for some period of time, probably 8 years, as heavy metal syndrome. And we went through, because they said, oh, it looks like Parkinson's. But it couldn't be isolated through the standard test of a levodopa challenge. So we went through a lot of nonsense to treat heavy metal. And on the way, and I guess this is why I'm sitting here, to say my successful role was as an advocate, as giving a separate eye to the doctors that we were dependent upon, and making sure that Barbara's interests were protected. As the Parkinsons progressed, and she became less able to do that for herself, my role became more important, and in the end, without overstating it, I think critical. So she had to go through that false period until this is another problem maybe to tell others who want to do this. I'm very fortunate in where I am, And we were able to go to the heads of movement disorder departments. We were living in Washington, D.C. at the time, and we bounced from one to the other. We went to the head of the department, the chairman, and what have you. No one figured it out. And finally, and this was the advocate, someone has to blow a whistle. And I said, let's go to the best and see what they come up with. And by that, I meant someone who was not just focused on movement disorder, but could look at the person and say, this is where you are. This is what we think you have. And again, I fell into the trap of getting the head of the department who was busy. And this is another message of advocacy. Often you're lured in by the names in a department, and then you're quickly passed on to other doctors who are jammed up with the assignment of caseload. So we got a resident at the Mayo Clinic who looked at Barbara and said the same thing that all the others did, observing, oh, you must have Parkinson. And she failed the test. And he said, let's do it a different way. And that was in about 2009. She had Parkinson's. And at that point, there's a bit of remorse about decisions that should have been made, decisions that were made in hindsight, all hindsight. But we moved from Washington to Los Angeles to be near our kids, because with Parkinson's, we couldn't travel that much more. I thought that would be the best thing. And she was opposed to it. And I really wasn't keyed to that. But what I came to understand is once we moved to California, her girlfriend network in Washington was left behind. And that was an important network. And as a caregiver, I could do certain things, but I couldn't do everything. And that was something that I thought would be made up by our kids, but our kids are our kids. They're busy and they have lives of their own. So I see I'm going on. I'll have to cut it short.
Stephen, if I can ask, what do you feel was lost by Barbara in losing that network of friends?
Yes, being able to talk, women talk.
Okay.
What was going on in her family, in her life. We were as close as I could get us to be close, but I'm not a girlfriend. And I think that there's a set of factors in that is different from the husband, in my case, the children, in our case, the son-in-law, the daughter-in-law. So I would say I would be more careful. I would still move because in the end, it was the best for us. I had to take it.
Let me ask you one more question, if I may. You described a situation in which, in your relationship with Barbara, you were the breadwinner and she took care of everything else in the family.
Very 1950s, Ozzie and Harriet.
So what was that like for you when that changed, when you had to become the person who was taking care of the person who had taken care of everything else? What was that like?
Well, the first thing we went through DBS, we extended Barbara's time of sufficiency, I won't say self-sufficiency, but sufficiency, into about the onset of COVID. And that's a whole other topic for caregivers, having gone through that period. But cooking, and we always had people to clean the house, but cooking and doing those sorts of things, we brought someone in to do that. And I think that that wasn't quite Barbara's house. And it wasn't all that comfortable, but it was easy for her. And then I couldn't cook. I can't cook. I can clean, but, not happily. So a lot of things were passed off to her that I just had no facility for. But as I said, I am a lawyer. I know how to advocate. I know how to mediate to try to keep things going. And I know how to argue when that was required. And we had to do that. in Barbara's case. And once COVID hit, Barbara had 2 episodes of going into Cedars. Her Parkinson's was internal, and she had respiratory problems on top of it that she eventually succumbed to with the help of COVID. And I screamed, shouted, picketed, whatever it took to be able to stay in the hospital with her overnight during COVID. And that, because she was losing her speech, she was losing her ability to keep track of things. And I think that was, as a caregiver, perhaps my finest moment, being able to do that.
Where you could advocate for her at a time that she could not advocate for herself.
Went to all the doctor appointments for years, knew the doctors, knew what she had. And basically, at times, particularly into COVID, she sat there and I was going at it.
Mm-hmm.
This is how she feels. This is what she's doing. This is what we think. What do you think? And getting appointments was very difficult during that period.
Let me bring Jim into the conversation now. Jim, you took care of your wife, Susan, and could you talk a little bit about what that was like for you about adapting to that situation?
Well, like Parkinson's is a progressive disease, so is being a caretaker. I actually had a caretaker for 57 years, my wife. I didn't treat her that way. She didn't treat me that way. But when she started, when the Parkinsons, after the DBS and the Parkinsons started setting in, and I had to become more and more involved, it evolved. And where she used to be, get in the car and go to a doctor's appointment, or go do this, or go get her hair done, or go, it became my job to get her there. Had to get her. She wanted to get her hair done once a month. It was very important to her. And in order to do that, I had to drive her to the beauty shop, which wasn't, but those were all things I never had to do before.
Mm-hmm.
I could go off on a 2-week motorcycle ride with my buddies, and she would be perfectly fine with that. All of a sudden, there's things that I used to do that I couldn't because I didn't feel I could leave her alone. And she couldn't be left alone. So we had people that, we have a lady that cleans the house, and she's a part of the family, and she helped care for Susan, as does the lady that walks the dog. But it starts to build up the thought that I can't go do something that I used to want to do. And it's very difficult to not get resentful behind that, as was already stated. So it became what had to be done. And I'm a huge advocate for support groups, because before we joined Judy's group, we were adrift. Nobody could tell it. The doctors did, all the great neurologists, all they say is Cinemet. You need more Cinemet. Take it more when you wake up in the middle of the night and take some. I mean, the only feedback we got on some of the things that were going on with her, she loved to sleep. She stayed up till 11, 12 o'clock at night, liked to sleep till 9. This thing, all of a sudden, she couldn't sleep anymore. And you can't take Ambien. That's a bad thing. So until we got in this group and said, does anybody have trouble sleeping? Oh my, then you find out that lots of people have. So being a caregiver is something different that I've ever done. But it's also very isolating. And if you don't have a place to go to listen or hear and talk to other people about it, it can really weigh you down. And you may not want to be weighed down, but caregiving is a 24-hour a day, 7-day-a-week thing that never stops. And unless you can get some help to get relief, or you can talk to some people about it, it's difficult mentally. And fortunately for us, we found the group, and it proved to be a lifesaver.
I want to echo what you're saying. I found that the support group was one of the most valuable things that Bob and I had access to. And I think the word that you used of listening is very key. It was very powerful to just sit in a room full of other people who had had this experience and listen to what everybody said. It was very helpful.
Oh, it was invaluable. Susan wouldn't miss it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, she may not have been, as things progressed, her movement became more difficult. It was walkers, and then we had a wheelchair in the house to get her around because we installed a stair chair because our bedrooms are downstairs and she lives up. But she knew when it was 11:30 on Tuesday. I can tell you that. She may not have remembered my name, but she knew it from 11:30 on Tuesday what we were going to do.
Jim, could you talk a little more about, you talked about the frustration of being in a situation somewhat like what Stephen was describing, where you had somebody who really had taken care of you, really good care of you for years, and then the tables turned. And could you talk a little bit about what that was like for you when you had to switch those roles?
What I can say is that my wife, Susan, was an unbelievable cook.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden, dinner became my responsibility.
Yeah.
And you could only, I could boil water almost. I could get it to bubbling. Other than that, and maybe making popcorn, being a cook has never been one of my, I can barbecue. So I had to learn to do that. And we had to come up with some restaurants that she liked to have. She loved the Talleyrand here in Burbank and their white meat turkey dinner. What do you want for dinner? Let's get Talleyrand. She would have said that 5 nights, 7 nights a week because she loved it. But I mean, taking on things that for the better part of my lifetime I'd never done before. I'd never had to help her get into bed. I never had to help her go into the bathroom. All those things were new experiences for me and for her. Mm-hmm. Some of them embarrassing for her.
And how, if I may ask, how did the two of you navigate that experience of one of you having to take care of the other person in intimate ways that they were not used to?
Well, because it became extremely, it had to be done. Mm-hmm. It wasn't, there was no voyeurism. There was no, it's just something that she came to realize, and I came to realize, as with the rest of this caregiver stuff, that's stuff that has to be done. And and she knew she wasn't capable of doing some of it. She was aware right up to the end. She knew her name, she knew where she were, and fortunately for us, our kids were all here on the night that she passed, and were by her side. Mm-hmm. Very, very grateful for that. But you just have to do what you have to do. I mean, I don't know another way to say it.
I want to, in a way, take this back to Dennis, because Dennis, I want to ask you, we're talking about kind of the resource of a support group, for instance. What sort of resources have you found useful? Have you and Marcia found useful in dealing with this?
Well, there's actually a number of Facebook groups to specifically set up for not just people with Parkinson's, but also for their caregivers. And you can go on there any time of the day or night and post a question or a comment, and in an hour or two, somebody's going to respond to you. Several people with ideas about what you can do. Frankly, our Marcia's doctors have been great. She's been a patient of Dr. Tagliati over at Cedars since fairly early on. And frankly, somewhat differently than Jim's experience, he and the fellows that he worked with over there Always had, good ideas, things about, how important physical therapy was, how important exercise was, a willingness to try almost anything, other than cinema. We've been through all kinds of things for her not sleeping, for her sleeping too much, for all of this stuff. And sometimes, his attitude, I was going to say is, if it doesn't do any harm, let's try it. If it doesn't work, okay, it didn't work. And we've really been grateful for the way he's approached it.
Well, that was common with Susan's doctors too. I'd go in and say, "What do you think of this?" They go, "Well, try it."
Yeah.
There was no hesitation.
Yeah.
Try it, give it a go, which indicated to me that they didn't know any more about it than I did.
Well, I mean, look, I think
that's my opinion. I'm just
well, no, and I think that, as probably everybody in this room knows, I mean, the state of Parkinson's research is ongoing, to put it politely, and there aren't a lot of answers, and the drug companies, they keep coming out with different formats of cinema. I liken it to shuffling the chairs on the deck of the Titanic,
right.
And God willing, in time we'll have more answers. But
Stephen, I want to circle back to Stephen. What resources did you find useful? Did you and Barbara find useful in trying to deal with this? I know that you acted as a very firm advocate for Barbara. Were there other resources that you felt you could take advantage of or that you found?
Well, as a current board member of PCLA, I can't say enough about what PCLA delivered. When we came to Los Angeles, there was no organization like it. I met through contacts with Judy and Patrick Losasso, who had experience with local PCLA services, community services before. And Barbara at that time was quite mobile and facile. She was I can't say enough about her and always, but she's a very bright woman. And I mentioned that I have some regret that I moved her out of our Washington, D.C. home to California to be with our kids. I should add to that the kids really delivered. And in the end, when the pandemic made it really impossible to go into any assisted facility, my younger son and his husband moved into my house. They took over the day and I took over the night to give her 24-hour service.
Wow.
Once we put PCLA together, she met women that not only could give her that missing ingredient of, I almost said girl talk, excuse me, lady talk over
lady talk is not much better.
and things of that sort, but who had the experience.
Right.
And who could commiserate meaningfully, authentically. And as Jim said, had practical knowledge. And this, for not only the patient, but the caregiver, it's an experiment in many ways. And trial and error. And having a group of friends, both at the meetings that we attended regularly, but also after the meetings, having met them, arranging to meet for lunch and other activities, that was a godsend. And that probably was one of the best resources that we had. When Barbara passed, I was so thankful for that. And the board was kind enough to give me her seat. And I've sat on it since. And the organization, not through me, but through its efforts and through caregivers and Parkinson's individuals, has grown and is delivering more of these services. The outreach is much greater. I can't emphasize enough, not as a board member, but as someone who's gone through this experience, how important it is to continue those services, which are unique to our region. I'm a large contributor to PCLA every year. Any contribution to the organization really makes a big difference because we're a little organization.
It's really true. It really is true. And as you're talking about this, and as Dennis is describing his experience, it reminds me that Bob and I at certain points felt that Parkinson's was this big unknown thing, and the only way you could understand its contours was by sharing experiences with other people and talking about what is your experience. And you realized, oh, well, there's this aspect to what it's like in movement. There's this aspect to what it's like with sleeping. There's this aspect. And as Jim was saying, there is no doctor who could give you that description. You kind of got it from your peers, from your colleagues, from people who are going through this and shared experiences and being able to try and together construct some idea of what you were all going through.
If I can interject, one of our support groups as PCLA is the doctors, the doctor community.
Yeah.
They're not saying, oh, you're talking wildly, sharing wives' tales and mythology and things, just the opposite. This is a resource in our community that you should make the most of. And I should say too, though I'm sometimes critical of doctors, as they are of lawyers, Los Angeles probably has one of the deepest benches of movement disorder doctors in the country. We're very fortunate with that.
Very fortunate.
Well, one of the biggest things for me and for my wife was the isolation that kind of faded away when you get involved with, when you finally realize there's other people going through what you're going through.
Right.
Because you're at home and you're seeing things you've never seen before.
Mm-hmm.
There's things that she's doing that she's never in her life done.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, wow, is she the only one doing this? And you find out, no, other people are doing it. It's extremely uplifting.
Yes.
To realize that you're not in this thing by yourself.
Yes. And also, I think the other thing that brings up is that sometimes there's an embarrassment for the person who has the Parkinson's, and they begin to want to isolate a little bit because they don't want to be seen as fragile or, unable to control their movements. And when you're in a group, and I remember the first time Bob and I went to a meeting, Bob tipped over a bottle of water, and we were both jumping up to mop it up and being very embarrassed. And everyone else was just sitting there going, oh, yeah, no, that happens all the time.
You're right. I mean, when you first go to the first Zoom thing and you see women with Parkinson's that's more advanced than Susan's was, sitting there being involved in the conversations and sharing experiences, it's uplifting. I mean, it's life-saving to a certain extent. Mm-hmm. You can get consumed at this thing if you're by yourself.
Yes.
And it's very unhealthy on both people.
Right. Dennis, do you feel that you've had to grapple with isolation in the ongoing situation?
It's certainly a problem. I mean, especially for my wife, because at this point she's having difficulty, retrieving words and ideas, and so in a conversation, it's difficult for her to participate fully, and even when people try and engage her, it's just such an effort for her
Mhm.
that it's extraordinarily difficult, and I know that she's feeling isolated. So yeah, I mean that's definitely an ongoing problem.
We have a question that's come in that's interesting, from Tim Knipe. Says, can you guys talk about the shift in intimacy in the relationship? How the person that you fell in love with changes, how that affects you as a man in the relationship. Would one of you like to take that question?
Well, I guess, from my perspective, obviously, as her and I both aged, we weren't 23 anymore. We weren't 30. We weren't actively sexually involved at all times like we were when we were young and crazy. So, yeah, there's a shift, like a shift away. I mean, it becomes less and less important. At least it did to me.
Mm-hmm.
It was just a matter of just aging together.
Right. Stephen, do you have a response to that?
I tell you, we were married so long that when things started falling away, let's say, activities that we would ordinarily engage in, that intimacy, it was sort of unthinkable because it was something Barbara wouldn't be comfortable with given her rigidities, and I certainly wasn't going to do anything to make matters worse.
Yeah, right.
And there was so much more to who we were as a couple that I didn't, to say it. It's a rather intimate topic, but it was no longer an issue.
Right.
Other things made up for it.
Tim he sent an additional thing to his question. He says intimacy does not necessarily mean sexual relations. So I think it's perhaps what Tim's describing more as a change in how each partner sees themselves in terms of how roles between men and women are often defined in our culture. For instance, I mean, it's kind of a surface thing, but the way Jim was describing having to come to grips with cooking and food and so forth.
We still held hands.
Uh-huh.
I still kissed her goodnight. I mean, we weren't all over each other,
but it was still a marriage, is what you're saying.
That's right. She was my wife.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think that's a key element. I know that I've talked to other couples in other caretaking situations where the person who was taking care of the other person was unnerved that they had become a caretaker, and they felt that somehow that compromised the nature of the marriage. And perhaps that's maybe a little bit of what Tim is alluding to. And what you're both saying, Stephen and Jim, is that it was a complete marriage all the way through.
It was just a change of roles, and
Yeah.
some ways, as Jim said.
Yeah.
I was the cared for, and as best I could, I became the carer.
We have another question here from Bob Eaton. Bob says, was your wife accepting of having help for you? Did she resent having another person in the house? And how did you deal with that, if so?
Well, we had help in the house, and Susan accepted it with an open heart.
Right.
But I've got friends who have people with Alzheimer's and Parkinson's, and the person with it absolutely refuses to let anybody in the house. And that makes it doubly difficult, because when you suggest something to somebody that you would just like an acknowledgement, sometimes they go nuts when you ask about it. They scream and yell, no, never, can't be in my house. Right. And that makes it doubly hard on you.
Yeah.
But I got friends who've been through it. It's awful. Susan was accepting. The people we had that came to help were from a wonderful service. They were all wonderful people who We were,
Dennis, how's Marcia with having people in the house? Or
It really hasn't been a problem.
Yeah.
I mean, she's grateful for the additional help. She's happy that I'm not forced to do everything 24 hours a day. So yeah, simply hasn't been an issue. I would also add, by the way, Jim mentioned he's worked with a service, and I know a lot of people do that. We've always hired caregivers from the community, through a network of friends, and through something as simple as next door neighbor. And one of the advantages to that, by the way, is cost. Because if you're doing a lot of hours, it gets quite expensive, and the agency is raking off at least a third, if not more. So in terms of tips, if you need somebody, I would start, like I said, by asking around. Reaching out to your network, reaching out to people in PCLA. Do you know somebody?
Stephen, did Barbara have any problem with having people in the household?
She didn't. I suppose we always had someone as a housekeeper once a week. And I was able to find someone from the community recommended to us, who stayed 5 days a week to cook, which was an unbelievably unbearable experience, and to do other things. It quickly became apparent that the idea that this person would take Barbara out, drive her around to various places, was not going to work. So I did that. I retired, and that was a hold my breath, because I saw basically what was coming, and I wish I had done it earlier. But I quit the practice so I could be full-time. And Barbara declined in the beginning of 2000 into the end of 2020. COVID came in March. We were washing our mail and newspapers then. We didn't know what the hell was happening. It was my absolute conviction not to go to a home, which was starting to be talked about, a care facility by the doctors. And I didn't want people coming into the house. And I had the extraordinary good luck of having my son and son-in-law move in. Yeah. And that was and Barbara, of course, had no problem with that.
Right.
Because
one thing that you're saying, Stephen, really brings up something I think that's really important for people to realize, is that when they're being pressured to think of putting their person into some kind of a housing facility, they don't realize that you can do this. You can bring the person home and care for them at home. It seems daunting. It seems sometimes it is represented as being impossible, but it's not. I think we really have to allow people to understand that you can do this. And it's it's the way we all want to be. None of us want to go into one of those facilities. So we do have a question for Dennis here, by the way. Jim D'Angelo says, for Dennis, when your wife has trouble speaking, do you notice that her body freezes also? It then takes a minute or two for her to come around.
No, I've not seen that the two are associated. I mean, she can be moving, but she's just having trouble. As I said, just finding the right words, or sometimes remembering the train of thought that she started on. And having been married for as long as we have, a lot of the time I know what she wants to say and what the thoughts are, and so I just say, well, do you mean you wanted to go here, or you wanted to go there, or do this or do that? And she'll say yes, or sometimes she'll say no. But a lot of the time I'll just sort of fill in.
So what you're describing is how important a long, successful marriage is to getting through a point where one of the partners ceases to be able to communicate as adequately as they used to.
Yeah, I mean, if we'd gotten married 2 years ago, I'm, not quite sure how that would have worked.
Right. Right.
Uh,
Did Stephen, was Barbara able to communicate adequately at the end, or how was that for the two of you?
I am a proponent of deep brain stimulation, and it definitely prolonged Barbara's period of mobility and flexibility. But something was not quite perfect, and she lost some of her speech capability. And this was probably 2017 or so. And it got progressively, well, it's progressive, everything's progressive, but it got progressively worse. But the same experience as Dennis reminds me of it. There's almost a body language communication that goes on after all that period of time. But that definitely was a social barrier for her. She didn't want to get into a situation other than a PCLA group where everyone understood what was happening and she could listen. To go out to a restaurant with friends and just sit there was a real problem for her. She didn't like doing that.
Jim, was Susan able to communicate towards the end?
He communicated right up to the end, yeah. But there were a couple of times late in the process where we had gone out to dinner with for a birthday with somebody, and all of a sudden she didn't want to be there. The food wasn't just right. I want to go home. And that became a small issue. And the problem with that is it just becomes more isolating. Yeah. Because when somebody calls up and says we're going, to the Tam O'Shanter for a birthday dinner, which is one of her favorite places, you have to say, I'm sorry, it isn't going to work for us. So then you're sitting at home, everybody's over there having a good time and eating a trifle for dessert, and I'm sitting here trying to figure out how to cook a hot dog.
Right.
Hot dogs are easy, by the way. You need help.
Sounds like PCLA needs to sponsor men's
cooking class.
Amen.
Amen.
All of you guys need to learn how to cook.
Hey, I know how to bake a chicken breast. It's just that I bake it every night.
I remember.
It's not the problem. I'm not starving to death, but I eat the same things all the time now.
When Bob was in his last rehab, they had done that horrible thing where they were pureeing all his foods because they were concerned with it. And I said, I am taking him home and I'm cooking him real food that he will enjoy. And for about 6 months, I cooked like mad. And he was happy. He was happy.
Good.
It was real food.
Sure.
It was one more example of that kind of terrible way that they dehumanize people, I think, as they go into those assisted living situations. And when you have them at home, you can make sure their quality of life is so much better. And besides, I mean, their quality of life is going to be better just being with people they love.
That's correct. If you think it's expensive to have somebody come into your house and take care of you, check out that care facility.
Absolutely. I completely agree.
That's no walk in the park.
Yeah.
If I'd like to give one more person an opportunity to ask a question if they haven't asked one already.
There's one from Angela Chang for Dennis again. Dennis mentioned about extensive traveling. I feel guilty of not planning any trips anymore. Would like to hear some tips and advices on this subject. So for all of you, were there ways that you were able to take your wife on trips, or how did you travel to see family, or how did you deal with that?
Well, first of all, I'll mention, although we didn't use them, there's several organizations out there which organize trips for people that are disabled. And Angela, if you want to contact me, I'll try and remember the names and give you some more details. I mean, we traveled on our own. I would contact a travel planner in the country we wanted to go to, a travel agent. Never here in the United States. If we were going to Argentina, I'd get a hold of somebody in Argentina. I would explain to them what the challenges were, and they would, they would find hotel rooms that would accommodate, somebody with a wheelchair. They would find tour guides who understood what the problems were and help us navigate the quite literal potholes. We went to Machu Picchu, and they took Marcia's wheelchair, these three guys, and they lashed poles to them, and they literally carried her up the mountain. I have pictures that are just
Wow.
amazing.
That's incredible.
I mean, it can be done. It's not easy. I'm a big collector of credit card points, so we travel business class, and I don't pay for it. But I've got, all these different credit cards, and I've figured out where I go to get 3 points instead of 1 point, and I've made a little hobby of it. So
I will mention one other thing about travel that Bob and I went to Berlin for 4 months in 2015, and people had said to me, isn't that going to be really difficult? But Bob spoke German. He spoke 4 languages, and he liked speaking other languages. And when we came home, everyone commented on how great Bob looked. And I think part of it was he had to keep using this other part of his brain. He had to keep thinking, and he had to keep responding to things. And it was, I think, things that give you, if you are able to do it, things that give you fresh experiences and make you think and react and bring you into the world also really help to deal with the kind of isolation that's been described.
Don't ever forget, you can be picked up at the curb at an airport.
Yes.
In a wheelchair, wheeled through security, wheeled to the gate, and they have a little narrow wheelchair. They'll wheel you to your seat in the plane.
Yeah.
Then they'll be there when you land and get you out and get you. There's all kinds of services. I mean, traveling internationally, I have no idea because we didn't, but we travel nationally to see our kids in Salt Lake, Chattanooga, and New York. And once you learn how to arrange for those services at the airport, I mean,
which is just a matter of calling the airline in advance. And
that's right.
Telling them it's not complicated, and you can do it around the world. They're quite familiar with it, and I will tell you that our experiences in most other countries have been better than the United States.
Yes.
Most of the people have more of a caregiving philosophy, more of an orientation towards the problems of older people. Again, they may not have the infrastructure. The streets may be all cobblestone, which is a real problem. But we were at one restaurant, and they saw that Marcia was in a wheelchair. And when she got up, when she had to get up she transferred to a regular chair. And when she got up, I swear to you, 10 people jumped up from the tables surrounding us to make sure that Marcia was okay and to help her, transfer from her chair back to her wheelchair. So
yeah, I agree. When we'd be in the subway in Berlin, and if the subway stopped suddenly and Bob was standing, all these hands would go out against Bob. So, it's, I think that brings us to the end of our time here. I really want to thank the three of you for joining me in this conversation. It was filled with a lot of great information, and also it's very powerful. I really appreciate it. And I just wanted to emphasize what people talked about. Join a support group. If you're not in a support group, either as a person with PD or a caregiver, join a support group. You will never regret it.
Thank you so much to Tom for moderating, and to all of our panelists. It was really wonderful. We can have 2 or 3 follow-up ones. Maybe we're going to have a series called Men Who Care.
Men Who Cook.
We're going to have a follow-up thing where we're going to have the three of you all do a cooking demonstration.
Hey, you take the hot dog, you put it in the boiling water.
No, it doesn't count.
You
How
get
to boil
this
20
from the
dinners in
Italian
5
restaurant.
minutes.
No big deal.
Okay, thank you all.
Thank you so much. This was unbelievable.
Just remember, cereal is a meal. Just remember that.
Little girl,
Put a
Hot dog's
strawberry
one
in.
of the basic food groups.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye,
we do
everyone.
have some exciting events coming up that I'll share with you in just a moment. But first, if you enjoyed today's program, we invite you to visit PCLA.org and then make a donation today. Your support helps us continue our mission to improve the lives of individuals and families in our community living with Parkinson's. Contribution makes a difference. You'll find that our contact information at the bottom of your screen. PCLA is a registered nonprofit and all donations are fully tax deductible. Thank you for being a part of our wonderful community. We love you.